Hey guys, this is Yale, aka Lieutenant Yale on Instagram, and I've spent just about this entire week making these two documents that you're gonna see filled out over the week because it really is time consuming. And I say just about this entire week because I didn't spend the entire working day doing this or in like an entire day every day of the week. But every day I dedicated some time to doing this thing, and it is very, very thorough. And what you're seeing here is a very clear insight into the placings and scorings, or uh, what should have been placings in a more insightful way of the 2025 Mr. Olympia contest. And I'll go into exactly what that means, but I want to also say that I made this video because I'm very, I have a pet peeve, and I'm not the only person like this. I have a pet peeve of not liking when people talk out of their ass. And what I mean by that is, I, in any subject, not just bodybuilding, I hear a lot of different opinions about what should or shouldn't be a result. And it bothers me because I don't know exactly why people say what they say. So maybe it's more about me more so than other people, but I would like to see people make more accurate statements. There are people who I think consistently do, but the problem that I see with certain critics is that they don't really justify clearly why their opinion is what it is. And I think that's really important because if you don't do that, it really gives an unclear idea of the value of a product, or anything really. Like, it doesn't have to be so business oriented. But I'm speaking in terms of business because I think the trope here is that people usually end up talking about the Mr. Olympia as a product, as a business related thing, because it is, but there is a little bit of jadedness that's attached to this analogy because, or categorization, because it gives people this idea that um, politics play into factor or factor into play and rationalize things that don't seem fair, or make things that seem fair that maybe you don't want to say is unfair or wrong, but still unclear. And that's happened a lot. I've noticed. I've been a fan and following this sport. I even really don't like calling it a sport because it is a pageant. It really is, and I know some guys don't like hearing that because I think it's a masculinity thing. It makes it sound less masculine, and there's some insecurity around that. But it really is. I mean, this isn't like shooting basketballs into a bucket or um, passing a football for a touchdown. It's a aesthetics competition. It's not. I think people get upset about it because a lot of these people are former athletes, myself included. So I think there's a little bit of a desire to maintain athlete status there, and people confuse the methods and the product. So the methods of bodybuilding, in order to create the product, there's an element of being an athlete. But at the end of the day, we're not doing a weightlifting competition to win. The person who lifts the best weight, there was even or the most amount of weight. There was even a contest. I forget the name of it, that Dorian Yates, I think, was the spokesperson for. And I think it was during the pandemic. They were coming up with this concept, and I think Doug Frushi was a part of this, where they were trying to make bodybuilding into more of a sport by incorporating feats of strength, right? So there was like there were selected exercises that would be scored based on how well and how many reps an exercise or someone was doing an exercise in. And then they would also judge physique. And then there would be like a composite score. I forget the name of this organization, and I don't think it exists anymore. But that's what I'm talking about. I think sometimes there's like this there's this insecurity-driven thing that happens where, because a lot of bodybuilders don't want to admit this to being pageantry, there's ways to rationalize it being a sport. And the purpose of this, these two documents that I made, I would argue actually do make this more of a sport, if that's something people want to categorize this as. Because what I've noticed is missing is that there isn't a very clear point system. So in sports, if you really want to like break things down and deconstruct what a sport qualifies as, there's some type of gaming element or sport scoring system. Otherwise, it truly could be a subjective thing, right? They don't award points or make the winner of a game of basketball based on how pretty a shot is or how pretty a dime pass or a pass is. It's based on whether the ball goes into the bucket or not, no matter how well or poorly that shot was executed. So in this rubric you'll see here, I actually do go through, I might rush it a little bit because I don't want to spend too much time the first time on this. And I will eventually share this these two documents, a link to it, because I think it's better to share than keep to myself. But for the time being, until I finish the entire thing, I would rather people see me complete it through these videos. Partly because it's a selfish thing too. I don't want somebody trying to copy or plagiarize something that I worked very hard on, and you know that's selfish. But I think part of these things is what things that have to be done as content creators. So going back to the purpose of this thing, you'll see here that I listed the initials of the top 6 competitors. I didn't have time or care to make time for every single competitor, just to illustrate the point of this thing, and that is to make a clear understanding of why the placings were what they were, at least in my opinion, which you'll see is based on a rubric that I've made. And I think you'll see as these numbers get typed out and displayed, the numbers do actually seem to make sense as far as placings go. You can actually get a sense of what a score of 1.1 looks like, or why two competitors that scored 3.3 or 5.5, why although these numbers are the same, they also are justifiably the same but different in how these points were scored. And to be clear, this is kind of like a golf scoring system, or how current bodybuilding scoring sheets are made, in that more points equal lower placings. So the person with the least amount of points as this sheet is filled out is the person that has the highest placing. And as of now, you'll see one row is filled out, or one row has numbers greater than 0, and that is what I call the flow category, the flow of the physique, which I will explain what exactly that means. But that is based on just one pose, because I want to make videos for each of these rows just to clearly illustrate, and also give myself an opportunity to make more content instead of trying to jam it all into one video. I also want to get this done sooner than later because this contest happened about a week ago, and if I make this late, I don't think people are really going to see it, and this is something I want people to see. So I'm going to exit out of this or jump to a different tab here of what these things mean exactly. I'll gloss over these again in other videos, but I do want to just touch on some of the key points here just so you understand exactly what it is my thinking process is and what it is exactly my intention is here in making these two documents and this rubric and system, grading system, really. If you didn't hear earlier, my name is Yale. My background is in education, and I've worked a few different jobs where I developed a sense of what rubrics actually mean, both from my education and actual work experience. So I was a teacher for a few years. I have worked both in public and private education. I've also worked as a trainer in corporate settings, not like a full-out career, but just in small roles at different companies where I was expected to train and verbalize what learning outcomes meant and what exactly expectations were for people to learn a skill or develop a skill or demonstrate some type of learning. So that's something that I want to share because I want you to get a sense of why I made what I made and really an idea of where my head's at when I make something like this. It's not random. Well, it is random in a sense that nobody asked for this, but I do like bodybuilding enough where I think there is some value in making something like this. Just slow down here because I'm trying to get as much of this done without dragging it out. So the context of this contest, I said earlier, is it's the Mr. Olympia, which I might have gotten these dates wrong. I rushed when I made this part. But it was last weekend in Las Vegas. I do want to make it really clear if anybody's watching this. This is not something that's supposed to be hypercritical of current judges or promoters or competitors even. This is more of an additional resource, or it is an additional resource that's really just meant to be useful for helping people better understand what it is they're seeing. And if there's anybody involved in the IFBB or NPC Pro League, maybe they could use this as a resource for themselves to help judges communicate better what it is they're doing. I'm not telling people what it is they should or shouldn't do. This is more of an educational resource and maybe you could say an entertainment type of content that I'm making here. So I did use what some people would call mixed methods in the world of academia, and that is really a fancy way of saying I translated qualitative data or things that are not necessarily numbers into numbers and making something that would be normally communicated through words or observation. I turn that into actual data and numbers. So that makes, I think, it gives people a picture of what it is they're seeing. And I think that's something that current bodybuilding, I don't want to say lacks, but I think I did see an opportunity here to make some clear ideas of what perceptions really mean, and maybe what some miscommunicated perceptions are where some miscommunicated perceptions are coming from. Let's see the purpose here. I don't want to read the whole thing. I'm sure you can just pause it if you want to read it. Like I said, this is meant to add clarity, and it's not supposed to be a dig at anybody. This is more of a resource, and it's supposed to be helpful for anyone involved. I don't want to spend too much time on these things right now because I will revisit it. But there are things that I've included in here that I think are important to consider when looking at these type of contests. And to people who are not familiar with bodybuilding and organized professional bodybuilding, there are some things that I think current judging or observers of contests, I know that sounds really politically correct, but I'm trying to say this in a clear way. There are biases and misconceptions that don't really get addressed, in my opinion, that are important to consider, because if not, I think it actually makes judging less clear and makes it harder for people to see value in what judging actually is. And again, I'm not trying to like harshly criticize what judging is now, but I do think that there's an opportunity here to just address why people may discredit judges and blame something like politics when it might not actually be the case. And I think that's not really fair to the competitors or the promoters or the IFBB or NPC Pro League or IFBB Pro League in general. I think that I like to think people have good intentions. That might not be true in certain cases, but I think something like this actually helps people see clearly where good intentions are coming from, or why a result is what it is. So this is, again, something I'll share with others later. I just want to get through some of the basic things here so you can get right to the scoring that I'm going to share today. Let's see, more bias stuff. I think there's a lot of things that get miscommunicated because there are people who have an untrained eye that have too much of a platform, frankly. So here is my methodology. It's not really cleaned up. I should say it is not cleaned up. I just typed this out so that I didn't lose my train of thought. But I wrote every bullet point here to give clear insight and answer any questions about why the rubric is what it is and why certain things are graded a certain way, and why there's distinctions in between different categories. So I'll get to that. I think because of the nature of this video, you can just pause and fast forward and rewind just to see exactly what that means. I don't want to go back and forth every single time. I just want to get through all these different bullet points, or some of the major bullet points, just so you have a better understanding of what this rubric actually means. So you see here that there's 3 tiers that I listed. Fundamental, what I call fundamental criteria, non-posing related criteria, and mandatory posing related criteria. I'll show what that means here in a minute, but those are the 3 different sections of my rubric that I laid out, separated intentionally because there are distinctions in levels, I should say. These are not random in that these are criteria that are based on the current rules and expectations of competition today. Some of these things I don't think are spelled out as clearly in competition scoring sheets. I'm not sure. I'm not a professional judge. I'm not making any accusations here. But I do think that this rubric does a good job of illustrating where some of these politically motivated accusations come from, or why it is unfair, or maybe fair in some cases, to question the outcome of certain placings or results. You'll see here that I do have three different types of numbers you'll see on the rubric. One is binary, meaning it's scored on a 0 to 1. What's the word? It's a 0 or a 1, binary, right? So 1 in that case means that the person did not meet the criteria, and a 0 means they met the criteria. They have no points deducted or added, which is a bad thing here. And the competitors in this case are ranked 1 to 6. If there are ties, the competitor that comes next in scoring is going to be based on how many competitors tied in front of them. So if 2 competitors are tied for second place, the next competitor ranked is going to be in 4th place because there are 2 competitors ahead of them, and so on, or so on and so forth. And there's also a decimal value involved here, where you'll see that the number added to the whole number is based on the number of requirements that the competitor fulfilled. So in this one criteria or row of scoring that I'm going to show you today, there's 10 requirements for that specific criteria or that row, and each criteria or requirement is a value of 1/10. So if a competitor has 5 requirements deducted, they are going to get 5/10 of a point added to their score. And this is really important to understand because this gives more insight into why numbers are what they are. I think when you have really just whole numbers or numbers that lack insight and clarity, it makes it harder to get a sense of why placings are what they are. And I think something like this actually does give anyone who's watching a bodybuilding contest a really clear idea of why someone's in second place and third place, or I should say the difference between someone in second and third may actually be much greater than third and fourth place, or the difference between someone in first and second may be greater than the difference of someone placing fifth and sixth. This also illustrates why there are mixed opinions about placings, because you'll see in this rubric 2 competitors might have 3 out of the 10 requirements unfulfilled, and although they have the same number of requirements unfulfilled, because one requirement is not, because they don't have the same requirements unfulfilled, it looks different. And depending on how that person is judging the requirement, their mind or their bias might actually give them the idea that one competitor should be placed higher than the other when they both have 3 requirements unfulfilled. And when I share this document, I would be really interested to see how it's received, in that it's very flexible, and that you can, whoever's using it can, if no one uses it, I'll do it. They can actually see that you can make adjustments so that it is going to give competitors a really clear sense of why they could have placed second, or why they're wrong in thinking that they could have placed second, purely because of muscle they don't have, or maybe an injury that's limiting them to developing a certain muscle. It could be a structural flaw. I think that's a big thing in this sport. We'll just call it a sport. There's a lot of people who just don't have good structure, and they can maximize their physique. They can maximize everything that's controllable, but because they just have bad structure, or they've put muscle on in a way that is almost counterproductive, it makes it really hard for them to accept that they just can't beat someone who has equal amounts of muscular development and better structure. So this is, I think, a good way for people to get past any denial or self-deception about why they are placing where they are. You could say it's good for mental health too. So this is more of it. I'm not going to read all this. I already think I spent way too much time going through these things. But this is more insight into the scoring methodology that I've created and why the numbers are what they are. I'm not going to delete this. I'll share this when I'm finished posting all my videos. This is more insight. So there are words that I specifically chose to incorporate because these are, in my opinion, very commonly misinterpreted words, or words that not everyone has the same opinion about what they mean. So, for example, this is the wrong page, but what I was going to say is like a word like conditioning. Not everyone really has an idea of what that means or agrees on what that means. And here I actually outline what these words mean, and I break each word down and pose down so that there is a tangible way to distinguish, does someone have good conditioning or not? Or does someone have good flow or not? And how is that being assessed? And I think this is really important because now people can't really talk to their ass. Like, if this is something that people accept, which I don't really think is going to be the case, well, it is very time consuming, and I don't see this ever being implemented. It would require a lot of work. This is more of like a post-game analysis, and like if you watch sports, like there are plenty of shows where they go over plays and draw X's and O's, and those kind of insights are hard to do during a game. I think the more people spend time invested in analyzing, they can actually do that kind of stuff mid-game and be able to make adjustments. But in reality, I don't ever see something like this being reliably used during competition. I don't know. Maybe with enough people on the same page, it can be done. It's not impossible, but it is a lot of work, and I did put a lot of hours into making this thing. So there are a couple other categories, like miscellaneous things that are not really reflected in scoring sheets that we see, but some of these things are assumed to be criteria that are not really clear to some people about whether or not it's being assessed. So, for example, you'll see a row here where a competitor is evaluated whether or not they brought a better package. So, if you're familiar with this term, this basically means, did the competitor retain the strengths that judges have seen in the past, and did they add to it rather than subtracting something that was a strength and maybe making up for it in a different area? Depending on who you ask, you could say that they didn't bring a better package. It's relatively the same in totality. So that's one of the categories here. I also did take the time to go over what exactly makes certain mandatory poses effective or done correctly. If you're not familiar with anatomy, none of these things are going to make sense. Maybe some of the more commonly known muscles will, like lats or delts. If you don't know what a TFL is, this is not going to make sense. If you don't know what a vastus lateralis is, it's not going to make sense. So for someone to effectively use this rubric, they do have to have some basic knowledge of human anatomy, which in my opinion, every professional bodybuilder should have. Which I kind of roll my eyes at when they say, like, when people make fun of science-based bodybuilding. If you're a bodybuilder, you're using science no matter how well you're able to articulate it or not. It's so ridiculous when I think about it, because all I hear is people who are insecure about being a nerd or dorky, but this whole thing is dorky. All of it, this is the nerdiest shit. It's extremely dorky. If you don't understand if you refuse to learn the basic words that make a professional good at what they do, I think you're just hurting yourself. Like in football, I'll use football again. I'm sure there's plays, basic words for adjustments that are expected to be learned. If a player just wants to use intuition and not study things, they're just not going to be considered good, because they should. There's an expectation to learn, right? So that's a sidetrack there, but I do really think it's ridiculous to make fun of any science-based things or nerdy ideas of nerdiness, because this is all extremely nerdy. If you're into bodybuilding, you are a nerd. I'm sorry to tell you that, but it is extremely nerdy. Let's see. So other poses, like I said, you got to know these muscles for it to make sense. I do have some key takeaways and questions that I think are really important. Obviously, I didn't clean this up all the way, but I'll go over these later. It's not really relevant right now, but if you want to pause it and read it, obviously you can do that. More words. So I do want to add that I grabbed these pictures from the NPC News Online website, and I also did use a free live stream recording of the Mr. Olympia contest, which was not from their official account. This was not the best quality video, but I just used it as a supplementary thing. I heavily relied on the photos, and I do acknowledge in this document here that there is an expectation for the photos to not truly reflect what people see in person. But I think you'll see here, if you're aware of what the biases are and how lighting works and accurately scaling images, it is easier to not understand what a physique's impressiveness is. But if everybody is on the same stage and scaled to proportion, unless you're really biased, I don't think it's likely that you'll have a misinterpretation of who should or shouldn't have won a contest, because all those variables are really like neutralized or not relevant, because they're all on the same stage, they're all sharing the same light, and the camera, I did notice the camera does seem to like have been tipped over at a certain point. It seemed like whoever was handling the camera accidentally knocked it over at one point, but they are relatively consistent in the positioning throughout the entire event. All right, I need to go to the gym here soon, so I'm not gonna take too long. So I'll go through each of these competitors here so you can finally see what it is these numbers exactly mean. The first one that I'll go through is Derek Lunsford. So I scored Derek Lunsford at a 1.1. The requirements here are listed in the comments. So for a front relax to be perfect, and I used past competition to illustrate what a perfect pose or flowing physique looks like, and I applied these requirements to every single competitor listed here. So there's an expectation that they have a V shape created from the delts to the base of the lower abs. The lats the teres and lats should enhance that V shape from the front. The quads should flare outwards and appear to be just as round and thick as the lats. Several competitors had issues with this, where their quads seemed bigger than their lats, or disproportionately bigger, or their lats and teres seemed bigger than their quads. The front and delt pec insertion, so where the front delt and pec meet, that part of the physique should appear to be protruding more outwards than the knees. You'll see exactly what that means, but in competition, that's a really important thing that doesn't get communicated. Number 5, the delts should cap and cascade, meaning there should be roundness, and there should be a cascading effect from the delt into the tricep. So like a bubbly, like a series of bubbles, if you will. And the bicep should also be hanging. Several competitors lost points or added points because they had their bicep facing towards the judges and not downwards toward the stage. So you really have to use your imagination a little bit to get an idea of how developed their biceps were. And it should be full. So I think the only competitor that I know he has full biceps, but because of how he peaked and the way he positioned his elbows, Samson Dauda actually did appear to have a smaller or less developed bicep. I also have the chest should appear to be thicker. That I think is pretty obvious. It should be appearing to be hanging over the abs, even from the front, or closer to the judges than the abs. I also have number 8 being roundness in the gastroc and the soleus, or separation. So this was a really hard one for competitors to show. I think the only person that had like really clear separation in the soleus and the gastroc was Derek Lunsford in his left calf. So this is a really hard one. I don't think anybody had perfect calves where the thickness is there in the gastroc, but also clear separation in both calves. And for those old heads that hate or really shit on modern competitors, they're probably going to agree with this because I think they're always criticizing modern competitors based on calf development. And I don't think they have bad calves, but if someone wants to be meticulous and really like a hard ass about it, I think calves here really illustrate kind of the weaknesses that you see a lot. Number 9, I have that the arm should be hanging at a height where there's a visible M-shape illusion with the pecs. So not everybody did this right, which was surprising because I think this is really basic for a professional bodybuilder. But the only competitors that I can think of, the top of my head, that created this M shape in the top 6 were Derek Lunsford, Martin Fitzwater, and I think Hadi and Samson both barely didn't make that M shape with their arms. Andrew Jack definitely didn't, and I can't remember. I think Nick Walker actually did as well. So I think the person who had the worst M shape made was Andrew Jack, and you'll see exactly what I mean here in a minute. And then the last requirement here is that the TFL and upper quad, so the upper vastus lateralis, should be engaged. In order to do that, if you've ever competed, you basically sit back on your heels a little bit and stretch out your abs. And when you do that, it helps the sweep fully engage up to your TFL. If you have any injuries or maybe not a fully developed muscle or any really tight fascia, this can actually make this sweep appear shorter than it is. I can't remember exactly, but I think Nick Walker was the only person that had an issue with this, which he got a point deducted for because his vastus lateralis and TFL don't appear to round out his quad sweep all the way up to the hips. It actually does look like his quads kind of like end a few inches before it gets to the hip bone. So I'll go through this here. I'm not sure how much time I've spent, but it already feels like too much. You'll see here Derek Lunsford 1.1. So I'll go through. I don't know exactly how to go through these tabs on one screen, but I'm going to try my best just to show this in an easier way. So Derek Lunsford 1.1, and let's look at Derek Lunsford front relaxed. There you go. So I wrote in the comments for every competitor why they got a point added. Derek Lunsford's only deduction was in the 8th requirement, which was an issue with his gastrocnemius and soleus. So I think he had actually basically a perfect physique from top to bottom. Could have been better, I think so. But Derek has a really interesting physique in that he doesn't seem to be the best in any one area, but minus how his back looks in certain poses and his abs. But he is close enough to perfect in almost every single pose and muscle group that I think you can rationalize why he won the Mr. Olympia very clearly. So, and this is just considering one criteria here, which is the flow of the physique in the front relaxed. So if you'll see here, he does have developed gastrocs, but you'll see here, could be the lighting, but just based on this picture, it's still a little blurry between his soleus and the gastroc. And here you can actually see the separation. So it was just by one calf that he didn't get a perfect score on this pose. All right, next I got Hadi Chupon. So Hadi got second in this. I have him at a 2.2. So let's go to Hadi. Where's Hadi? Where'd he go? There he is. So here I have Hadi at a 2.2 because he did have less requirements met, and that was his triceps, which I said do not appear to cascade. So if you look at Hadi's triceps, they look a little flatter than Derek's. It could be the way he positioned his arms, but you can still see the short head, but they're flat, or there's almost a straight line here. His biceps do hang, but you almost wonder if they could hang down more, because I mean, he does have arms, but there's a little bit of a flatness to his triceps here. And I did have him deducted on the calves. So this is another reason I think Hadi stands really like have a misconception of why he should have won. I don't know. We'll see on this whole rubric. But his calves look really straight and angular. There is definite thickness here at the gastroc, but it's not as round as Derek's. And there is not as much separation between the soleus and the gastroc as Derek's. So if you look at Derek, all right, he's on the other slide. It looks thicker here. I don't know if it's subjective, but I think it's pretty clear. Hadi's calves look thinner than Derek's, just barely, and you can see clear separation in the soleus and gastroc here, and I don't see as much of a line here. I mean, there's definitely something, but it's a smaller line, and the reality is a bigger or longer gastroc looks better than a shorter gastroc. So had Hadi had more separation even in this shorter gastroc, I think you could have made a case for him to have better calves, but it looks kind of thin to me. Like if you were to scroll down, I couldn't tell you that this is a bodybuilder. This could be a soccer player. But if you scroll down on Derek's physique, still maybe could be a soccer player, but that looks like a more muscular calf to me. I don't know if you guys disagree, but this looks like a more muscular calf to me. All right, so I'm going to go down here because I already spent way too much time. All right, so I'll just go to third because this is easier. I had Martin Fitzwater and Nick Walker tied in third place. They actually had different requirements not met. So Martin Fitzwater I had marked down on his tricep, his bicep, and the way his arms are positioned, that M shape that I showed earlier or mentioned. And you'll see here, his biceps are hanging, but they're not fully hanging down. They're still pointed towards you in a way where, like, it's definitely an apparent bicep there, but unless they're hanging down fully, it's kind of hard to tell how developed they are. And same goes for his triceps. There's definitely a cascading effect, but Martin just barely didn't meet this requirement in that I can't really see the short head. Like, it's maybe more apparent here on his right side, but I'm not really seeing the short head that well here. I'm seeing more of the, like, top view of his biceps, whereas I want to see more of the triceps. Who's a good example? Like Derek, I don't know. I think he shows more tricep here than Martin does. Maybe not. I might need to revisit this. But I think Derek's triceps are more apparent. Yeah, see, if you look at his biceps, you can't really see the other side of his bicep, the long head, as much. But if you look at Martin, like, I see a short head, and oh, you know what? Maybe I need to rescore Derek. Let's see. He has a short head. I mean, this is a tough pose in general because you can't really... Maybe I should show someone who nailed it. So I think... Yeah, if you look at Reagan, this is what I'm talking about. I can see the short head of the tricep really clearly, right? It's not complete, but I can see it. So maybe I need to mark down... so maybe Derek... Huh. So this is interesting. So I'm going to change Derek's score here. And I'm going to give him actually... him and Hadi both a... They have a tied score, so they both get a 1.2. So I actually have him and Hadi tied. So that shows, I think, that I made a mistake, but also why this actually makes people believe that Hadi should have won. So we'll see. Maybe he did deserve to be the winner, but I think that actually adds clarity. So that's a good thing that I caught that just now, because I don't want to make this inconsistent at all. Yeah. So next we'll go over to Nick. So Nick I have deducted on quads, calves, and quads again. So the first thing is his quads don't appear as thick as the lats. So if you look here, Nick's lats, even though there's a shadow here, his lats and teres look significantly thicker than his quads. I don't think he has small quads, but for whatever reason, I think it could be the way his parts of his quads are developed. You can actually, it makes his quads look smaller. So that also leads to the last criteria he didn't meet, and that was his lateralis and TFL don't seem to connect all the way up to the hip bone. So if you see here, his lateralis seems to end like a few inches underneath on his left side. Whereas if you look at another competitor, he also kind of has that issue. Hadi's lateralis looks like it meets further up the hip bone. Urs has good quads. His quads just barely, like it all ties into like a teardrop shape towards the hip. Martin kind of has this issue with the quad here on the right. So let's see if I marked Martin down. So another correction. Quads flared. So Martin's right quad actually marks him down one more. So he has 4 requirements not met. So this is why this detail matters. Can actually make a case clearly why someone placed where they did. And this is going to piss people off because everybody has fans and stands, and I'm going to clarify it was Martin's right quad. So if you look here, it looks like it ends a few inches beneath. But if you look at his left quad, there's a little bit of a roundness here at the TFL. Urs barely hangs on. Like, it's funny how people have asymmetry here. Like, maybe it's the angle, but Urs barely has full sweeping quads. Hadi has full sweeping quads. I would argue that his Hadi's quads don't look as good as Urs's, but his go all the way up to the hip bone. So back to Nick. So that means Martin has 4 things deducted. So that actually puts him in 4th place. So Martin gets a 4.4. And Nick stays at a 3.3. So just to go back to Martin real quick and show you why he got what he got. His tricep doesn't fully show. You can still see it, but a good example of someone who shows more of it is like Urs. You see more of the short head here. Whereas you're really seeing, it looks like you're seeing the side of Martin's arm here. And here you see Urs shows more of the short head. He has really good cascading delts and triceps. So this comes kind of paired with the whole biceps thing not hanging down. He has kind of a flat M shape. Urs kind of has an awkward looking one. I'm not going to talk about Urs right now. But Hadi has more of an M shape. It's a little wide, but let's see if I marked him down on that. Yeah, no, Hadi got it. And then let's finish up with Martin again. And then the calves. You see here, I marked Martin down on calves. There's a little separation, but the thickness, I mean, they almost look like cankles. Like, I'm not trying to make fun of this guy, but I mean, that's kind of what it seems like. But his left calf actually looks better. There's more separation, no, about equal separation, but there's more of a roundness here in his left calf than his right. And it actually looks like his left calf has a lower insertion or a lower tendon than his right. Could be his left foot is more forward. Maybe that's the case, but for whatever reason, the way his legs are positioned is not symmetrical. And that's the point, is not asymmetry. The point is, does the calf have clear separation, which you could say is there, but I'm comparing this to someone like I think Derek was the only person just by one calf. Yeah, like you see here, Derek, clear separation in the soleus and gastroc, and then you look at Martin. I see some separation, but it's interesting. Like the separation he has in his right calf looks a little bit better than his left, but I think it's only because the line here of the gastroc is longer. So it's not actually, it's an illusion. It's actually not more separation than his left. It's just that the way his calf looks, the line is longer, so it might give you the impression that it's more defined. But if you look at Derek, maybe I'm wrong. I think I'm right about this. His soleus and gastroc look clearly defined. So I'm going to stop here. I already made this video really longer than I wanted to, but you'll see here these scores reflect, I think, pretty accurately how competitors looked. A reminder that competitors might have I gotta fix Derek's. So Derek's issue was his arms. Forget. So two competitors might have the same score, but for different reasons. And that actually, I think, gives a clearer idea of why perceptions are what they are. So I'm going to edit this. It's interesting. I actually got this wrong on the first part. I'm actually curious why I got that wrong. I think it's easier if you compare. I think because Hadi's tricep looks so much flatter than Derek's. It's like a comparison thing. His tricep actually does look kind of flat here, but Hadi's looks flatter. So it's not actually a good looking tricep in this pose. It's just better than Hadi's. See, there's like a flat line from the rear delt to the elbow. But Derek's, there's still a cascading a little bit here, but if you were to just draw a line, it goes straight to the elbow. But someone who has a pretty good distinction is like, even Nick. There's a little bit of a curvature from the delt to the elbow. It's not a straight line. And there is a cascading effect. It's like a series of bubbles, right? Urs is the same way. There's a little bit of a curve and a bubble. Even though it kind of looks awkward, this is still better. If you just look from here, that's a better arm than Derek Lunsford's. Okay, that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I already spent way too much time making this, and I'll make more